Hi, this is Heather with Jenkins CPA. When we have a client coming in for tax preparation, the number one question they ask is, what do I need to bring? So here's what we need to bring. The very first thing you need to do is gather up all those income documents. You've got your W-2s from your jobs. You have your 1099 miscellaneous. That's if you would have some sort of self-employment typically. 1099 INT, that's interest from your banks, different things like that. Anything that has 1099 on it, we're going to need it. All those forms are going to come in an envelope that say important tax information included or important tax document, something like that on the envelope. You also need to gather all of your potentially deductible items. So we're going to have the 1098 mortgage or MTG, which is for your mortgage interest on your property that you own. You'll have charitable letters if you have giving, so any kind of tithing to your church or giving to any charitable organization. If you've given to them and they're tracking it and send you a letter, we're going to need that letter. And any kind of taxes that you've paid throughout the year for property taxes, so that means your personal property taxes, your real estate tax on any property that you own. It doesn't have to be just the house that you live in. All those tax receipts, go ahead and bring those in too. It may or may not be deductible on your individual return, but it might be, and let's get everything that we can gathered together. Then we need the information that is potential credits. Those are big deals, so those are going to be your kids, right? They're big tax credits. They cost a lot of money, but in tax time, they're good, right? We want them. So we need all their information. We need their legal name, we need their social security number, we need their date of birth, and then for certain credits, you're going to need to prove that they actually lived with you. So you can do that by a number of ways. You can get a letter from the school, you can get a letter from clergy, a letter from the doctor, a letter from social services. If you have mail that has come to your house with their name and your address on it, that will work. So anything like that where you can prove that they actually lived with you, certain credits, the big high dollar credits, they're going to require that you have that. So just head that off at the pass and get that before you go into your appointment. Then for daycare expense, if you have a child that's under the age of 13 and you pay daycare, there are certain things that you have to have for that as well. You have to have obviously the dollar amount that you paid for daycare, but then you need to know the name of the daycare. So if it's an individual, you would need to know that person's legal name and their social security number and their address. If it's a business, you'll need the business name and the tax ID number for that business and the address as well. So it can be a pretty decent credit. It doesn't get limited by income, so whatever you need to gather on that, that's great to have it before you get there. It just makes everything go a lot faster. If you have anyone in your household that has higher education, so somebody's going to college, be it you, the taxpayer, or your spouse, or your kids, whoever it is, you'll have to go on to the student account. Typically, they don't usually mail these anymore. So you'll have to go onto that account or get your child to go onto their account and print off that 1098T. That's for T for tuition. It'll be in there in the tax document. You may have to search around for it a little bit, but you'll be able to get it. That document shows how much their education expense was and how much the scholarships were, or anything that they won't have to pay back. Now, even if they had student loans, we still need this document, because if they have to pay it back at some point, then there's a credit to be had on that return. So we need that, and we also need how much was paid for books. So that's not on that 1098T. You'll have to get that somewhere else. Either look through and get your receipts. If you bought your books on Amazon, you can usually go there and look at your history and get it. You can get it from the bookstore of the college if you're buying it through there, and that can be printed out online on every college I've looked at. So you should be able to get all of that information online if you're purchasing them that way, which typically that's how it works for those books. If you have a business, you're going to have to bring, it depends on what kind of business it is and what you need to bring in. So if you have a partnership or an S corporation, that has its own return. And so what you get from that to report on your return is called a K1. It's either a K1 from the partnership or a K1 from the S corporation. So you'll need to bring that documentation in as well. And if it's not set up like that, if it's a sole proprietor and you're going to file a Schedule C on your personal tax return for that business, then at minimum, you're going to have a list of the income and the expenses for that business. If you just have a pile of receipts, that's fine too. Take them in. Just realize that that could cost a little bit more because someone's going to have to do the bookkeeping of sorting and adding all those receipts. So that's something that a lot of people choose to do themselves just to help save some time and money when they go in. Either way is fine. Most tax preparers don't care which way you bring it in as long as they get it. You got to have the receipts, got to have it, or you have to have the list. You have to have something to show the income coming in and the expenses going out. Usually on that, separate from those, there's a couple other things, and that would be mileage. So if you drove any for business, you're going to have at least the number of miles you drove. If you have your mileage log, that's fantastic. But we need to know how many miles you drove for that year for your business. The other thing is a home office. So with it, you have to have the square footage of your entire place that you live, be it in a house or apartment or whatever. You have to have the entire square footage of that, plus the square footage of the office itself. So keep in mind, if you have a business that has storage and so you use an entire closet and all that's in there is your Mary Kay inventory or whatever it is you're doing, count that as square footage for your home office because that counts as well. Then with that home office, we need to know how much your utilities were for the year. We need to know how much your homeowner's insurance or your renter's insurance was. And if you rent, we're going to need your rent. Mortgage interest, well, we should already have that because you brought it in for your potential deductible expenses. So all those types of things will add together and use on your business portion of your return. So if you have all those things, that is fantastic. That's what we need. Now we just need to prove that you are you. So the IRS requires that we physically see, we the preparer, physically see your Social Security card and then some other form of picture ID. So we require at our office that you bring in your Social Security card and your driver's license or your ID card from the state, something that's issued like that has those pictures on it. If you're going somewhere and they're not asking you for that information, you really need to question why you're there, because either they don't know that they're required to get that or they don't care. And either way, that's a scary deal. We're supposed to do it. They need to have it. That's how we make sure that the return is correct. And you know what? 9 times out of 10, more than that, 99 times out of 100, you're going to give us exactly the right spelling of your kids' names and your name and the exact right Social Security number. But people get nervous when they do taxes and they end up writing down what you call your child, even though the name's slightly different. And then it ends up kicking back later because they don't match. The IRS matches immediately the legal name and the Social Security number of everybody on your return. So if you bring those documents in, we'll just make sure that they match exactly, and you won't have to come back and deal with that. And that should be anywhere you go. It doesn't matter where you're going for this information. Everything should be exactly the same. And then if you bring your driver's license in for you and your spouse, both people who are listed as taxpayer or spouse on the tax return, that just gives us that ability to match that name on the Social Security card to you who's standing in front of us. It's what we're supposed to do. It makes sense. You don't want someone to take your identity, so that just helps everybody in the process make sure that the right person's filing the right return. Now, we also need the Social Security cards for everybody on the return, so we'll need your children's too. We don't need their driver's license, even if they have one, that's fine. We get that proof if we need it for the other credits earlier, what we talked about. So that works great. We also need 5 years of your previous tax returns if you've not been going to that tax service, wherever you're going. The first time you go, 5 years is what you should bring. Now, if you don't have 5 years, bring what you have at least. But 5 years, the reason for 5 years is because there are certain credits that carry for that period. And if you don't have all the information back that far, then you're missing some of the information, or you could potentially miss some of the information on the return. The last thing we want to do is have a credit and not carry it forward and lose out on that money. So we don't want to do that for you, and you don't want it either, I promise. So bring what you have, but 5 years would be ideal, just to make sure we pick everything up. Hopefully this was extremely helpful. If not, shoot me a message, ask me a question. I didn't say everything you could possibly bring. That's way too much information. But if you have a specific question, feel free to ask away, and we'll do what we can do. Thanks for listening. Heather with Jenkins CPA. Think outside the block for your money, business, and life.